In this video tutorial, we will explore the CSS preprocessor SASS. Syntactically awesome style sheets. SASS is a CSS processor, a layer between the style sheets you author and the .css files that you serve to the browser. If we click on the link, Learn SASS, on this page, SASS Basics, before we can use SASS, we need to set it up. It is recommended that we install SASS first. So if we click the Install button, we can go here to learn more about how to set everything up. You can see that this looks pretty daunting. The easiest way that I found to begin the SASS process was to download and install Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a free open source editor, and it is available on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows platform. And this is the code editor I will be using for this demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back into my text editor. Remember, I'm using Visual Studio Code. And remember, in my extensions, I've already enabled the live SASS compiler, the live server, and the prettier code formatting. You will at least need, at a minimum, the live SASS compiler and the live server for this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to my file structure. Notice I have this SASS demo folder. This SASS demo folder is on my desktop. I downloaded this from the Canvas assignment, and this will be our project folder. Inside of this project folder, I went ahead and created the index.html file. You will go ahead and select File and Open Folder so that you can bring that folder, the Demo SASS folder, into Visual Studio Code. Once you have that folder open, go ahead and click on the index.html file. Inside of this file, I went ahead and I created some content. The content that I am using comes from the San Diego Mesa Web Development Program. If I scroll down to the bottom, I went ahead and I took some of the content from this paragraph right here to use it in my index.html file. So the content in this web page is going to create a responsive landing page for the San Diego Mesa College Web Development Program. This project will give us some hands-on experience as we learn how to use SASS. I want you to notice this div right here. It's just a div with an ID of BG, and then I've closed the div. Then I have a header, and I've given this a name of WebD168 with a pipe symbol and then SASS demo. And then inside of the main element, I have two sections, one for card and one for primary. And at the bottom of the section, I have an A tag with Learn More, which will be used as a button link. To begin, I'm going to go ahead and after the title, on line 6, I'm going to go ahead and type in link and tab. So Emmet is already built into this text editor. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type CSS and then a / main.css. Our SASS file, which will have an extension of SCSS, will be compiled into CSS. And then over on the left-hand side, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new folder. And it's going to be CSS. And I'm going to select Enter. Inside of this, I'm going to create a new file, and it's going to be called main.scss. It needs to be the SCSS file, not a CSS file. Our SASS file, which will have the extension of .scss, will be compiled into CSS. A browser does not understand SASS code. Therefore, we will need a SASS preprocessor to convert SASS code into standard CSS. This is where our live SASS compiler extension will make the job a breeze for us. Notice down here at the bottom, I have a link that says Watch SASS. I'm going to want to go ahead and select that. And notice when I did that, it went ahead and created the main CSS file. We don't modify this CSS file because any changes in here will be overwritten automatically when we save the changes in our main.scss file, our SASS file. The main.css.map file is also generated. You will not want to touch this file. A source map is just a way of tying the SASS that you write to the CSS that gets written. When you write SASS, you're not writing CSS, so you need to create a link in between the two. We will see how this works later on when we process this SASS file. We're going to write all of our styles in this file, the main.scss file. When we selected the Watch CSS, we also got this extra dialog box down here at the bottom. You can drag this up or down, and you can also close this. I'm going to leave this open. Whenever I save this main.scss file, it will let me know if I have any problems with this file. I like to leave it here so that I can see my files being automatically generated. If there's one reason to learn how to use SASS, it's because of variables. Variables have made working with CSS a lot easier. So let's take a look at how we can use variables in SASS to make your CSS easier to manage. I'm going to head to the San Diego Mesa College Web Development website and sample the navy blue header using the color picker tool, Colorzilla. This is an add-on in Firefox, but you can also add it to your Chrome browser. And then I'm going to go back to my code editor, and I'm going to create my variable by first typing a $, and then the word primary. And then I'm going to give this a value. So I'm just going to go ahead and select Control-V and paste. In this case, I'm going to paste that hexadecimal value because that is what is currently in my clipboard. You can use any of the color value keywords such as hexadecimal, RGB, RGBA, HSL to define your variable's color value. And I'm going to go ahead and close that with my semicolon. So my first color variable will be this navy blue. And I will go ahead and create another variable, and I will name it accent. And I'm going to go back to the Mesa College website. I'm going to make sure select the color picker, and I'm going to choose this gold that's being used for this button. I'm going to go back to my code editor, and I'm going to go ahead and paste since that's in my clipboard. The reason why we are using variables for our color style is in case you need to update your color scheme. Instead of using the same color hexadecimal values for CSS different properties, we can use color names so that our colors are easier to manage in a single place. That's what variables allow us to do. So I'm going to use the primary variable for my background color and the accent variable color, as the word suggests, as an accent color in my website. You can also use the materialpalette.com website to create your own color palettes. All you need to do is select color, and then here is your color palette. So then you have the hexadecimal values that you can go ahead and copy in your website. So they already have a primary color, a dark color, a light primary. All right, I'm going to go back into Visual Code Editor. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I can use this variable. So I'm going to type body, and I'm going to go ahead and type BGC. And because this code editor comes preloaded with Emmet, I can go ahead and use my Emmet shortcodes. And I'm going to select tab, and I'm going to use $primary. So instead of giving this background property with the value of hexadecimal, we've just replaced it with the variable that we created. This will not work in regular CSS. So if we save this file, save, and I'm going to go ahead and select the Watch SASS button down here at the bottom. And if I go over here and I open up the main CSS file, we can now see what has happened is it converts this this primary variable, and we don't see the variable. So all we see is the body selector with the background color property, and the value has been written as a hexadecimal value. Using color variables is very handy because if we have a color theme that is widely used throughout our site, we only have to define it up here once. And if we need to make a change to the color scheme, we only have to change the variable variable. Another way variables can be helpful is with fonts. So I'm going to go out to my browser and I'm going to type in Google Fonts, and I'm going to select Montserrat, M-O-N-T, and here it is right there. And I'm going to choose this Return to Classic Site, and I'm going to go ahead and select this font, and it says Family Selected, and I'm going to use this @ import. And between the style tags, I'm just going to copy this @ import, Control C. I'm going to go back into my code editor, and before primary, I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in there. After the accent variable, I'm going to type one that is font main, and I'm going to go ahead and use that Montserrat style, and I'm going to go ahead and put a comma, and then I'm going to say sans serif, and then I'm going to end that with my semicolon. So you may create a variable like font main and font highlight. By creating these different variables, you'll make it very easy to update your CSS. We can also use what are called SASS maps. While you might not be familiar with this name, we already use maps often in other languages, usually under the names of associative arrays. Associative arrays are arrays that use named keys that you assign a value. So a SASS map is an array matching keys to values. For instance, what would be really handy when you are developing a site with a specific color theme that will utilize multiple colors is a SASS map. The way that you do this is we create a normal variable. So I'm going to go above where it says primary, and I'm going to say colors and a colon, and then I'm going to use parenthesis. And I'm going to make sure that I close this with a semicolon on line 5. And I'm just going to go ahead and take these two styles, and I'm going to do Control X, and I'm going to put them inside of here. And I'm going to remove the $sign in front of the primary and in front of the word accent. And I'm not going to use a semicolon, but I'm going to use a comma after the first item, and after the second item, I'm going to completely remove that semicolon. Begin the SASS map with a $sign, and then colors, a colon, and then the parenthesis. Inside of the parenthesis are my key value pairs. Notice the keys, primary and accent, do not have a $sign in front of them. Make sure you terminate your SASS map with a semicolon. So how we get the value associated with a key, we use so right here, we're going to remove primary, and we're going to type in the function map-get, and between here, we're going to use these two arguments. So the first one is going to be the map, which is going to be colors, and the key is going to be primary. So I'm going to highlight this, so Control C, and I'm going to paste that over top of that. So that will be our SASS map. And the next one is going to be primary. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that there. So this function returns the value in the map associated with the given key. If I save this, Control S, I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this down here a bit. And I have Live Server open. I'm just going to select Go Live. And here you can see this blue color that is for the body property in our CSS style. And if we look at our main CSS file, even despite having changed from a regular variable to a SASS map, it still looks exactly the same. The SASS map is an awesome tool for organizing your code, minimizing duplication, and making your code base less prone to overall careless errors. You can add as many colors to this colors map as you would like. This is what our project will look like on an iPhone 10. We're going to first design and structure our CSS based on mobile first before we create our responsive media queries. You will notice this background is not a regular flat background. I have a polygonal slanted design shape here. And there's a handy free web-based tool that can help us generate what's called a CSS clip path. This isn't specific to SASS, but I wanted to show you how this handy tool works. I'm at this URL, bennettfeely.com/clippy. And if you go to Google and type in the search field CSS Clip Path Generator, you will find the same result. And this is really cool because we can create all kinds of shapes here. And the shape I'm going to use is the pentagon. So I'm going to choose pentagon, and then I'm going to simply recreate that general shape as seen here. So I'm going to drag this up into the corner, drag this up into the corner, drag this over. Now, if you notice, the size for this is 375 by 812, and I kind of would like to get close to what this style is right here. I've noticed when I'm using this tool that I can go no higher than, notice the highest I can go is 426. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 375 and divide it by half, and 812 and divide it by half. So those numbers are going to be 187, 187, and 406. And then I can just drag this down here, and I'm going to just drag this over a little bit. So I want to match the dimensions or the proportions of the iPhone 10 as closely as possible. And the only way that I could do this was to divide that in half. At the bottom of this page, we can see we have this clip path code. And that's exactly what was generated. So we're going to go ahead and just highlight this. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this, Control C. I'm going to go back into Visual Code Editor. And I'm going to go ahead and add in some additional styles. I'm going to go ahead and add in the body, HTML, and I'm going to add in the height. And it's going to be 100%. This property defines the height of the content area. I'm going to add in a space here just to give myself some separation here, clean this up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make some more changes here. I'm going to change the body background, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove this for now. And I'm going to type in font family, so FF, and I'm going to choose font main. So I'm going to use the variable font main. And then on the next line, I'm going to do margin 0, so M0. And this is to get rid of any default margin that's added by the browser on the body element. And then we're going to just go ahead and we're going to nest our styles. So another popular SASS feature is called nesting. It allows you to put CSS rules inside other rules, and it's a great way to organize your styles so that they're easy to find. So one of the things that we have to watch out for is that we don't nest things too deep, or the rules that CSS will generate are going to be too unwieldy. It is recommended that we do not do any more than 3 or 4 levels deep. So we're going to go ahead and after margin, but inside of the closing curly brace, I'm going to put in a couple of spaces, but inside of the closing curly brace, and I'm going to type in £BG. And I'm going to use my curly braces, and inside of this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste that clip path. So I'm going to do Control V, and there's my clip path that we went ahead and got from our generator, this code right here. So if it's no longer in your memory, just go ahead and copy it again. And there you go, clip path polygon BG. So this £BG comes from our index.html file. So right here I have a div ID of BG, and this is going to be our entire background. So this polygonal shape that we saw earlier. All right, let me go back to my styles. And I'm going to go ahead and add in a few additional styles. So after our clip path, we'll add in a background color, BGC, and I'll just do tab. And we're going to use that same function. So map, get, and we're going to use the SASS map colors, and we're going to use the primary color for that one. We're going to go ahead and give this a width of 100% and a height of 100% and a position absolute, and we're going to give this a z index of -1. So the z index, the items in the foreground, will be on top. So this is something that we would not be able to do in regular CSS. In SASS, the ID BG is nested inside the body selector. But when we save this, Control S, and we look at our main CSS file, notice the rules are defined one by one, not nested. Also, on the ID BG, the vendor prefixes were automatically added. Because you can nest properties in SASS, it is cleaner and easier to read than standard CSS. If I go back out to my web page, and notice I've got this little white background here, but if I right click and I go to Inspect Element and I click on my responsive design icon right here and I change this, notice it comes in kind of not looking very good right here. If I click this little button right here, it'll disable that. And if I scroll down, okay, so there's my little clipping path where it's clipped off in the corner right there. Okay, let's go back to our code editor. I'm back to my main SASS file. And another concept I want to introduce is SASS functions. Functions are blocks of code that return a single value of any SASS data type. To create a custom function, you need two SASS directives, the @ function and @return. The first creates the function, and the second signals the value the function will return. A potential use case for a function is to avoid having to use this map get function and then having to specify first the name of the SASS map and then the key that you want. Instead of using the map get function every time we want to use a caller, in our CSS style, let's create our own function. So I'm going to go on line 9 after my font main variable, and I'm going to add in a couple of spaces here. And the syntax will look like this. We begin with the @ sign, and then the word function, and then the function name, between parentheses, any arguments. Inside of the curly braces, we have the @return directive, and the value to be returned terminated with a semicolon. All right, it's that simple. So I'm going to leave this in my code. So I'm just going to highlight this, and I'm just going to select Control / so that I can comment that out. And I'm going to give myself some room again, and then I'm going to go ahead and create my function on line 14. So I'm going to begin with the @ function, and I'm going to give this a relevant name that makes sense, and I'll use the word caller. And then this function will accept one argument, and that will be caller-name. You can name this whatever you want. Inside of the curly braces, we use the @return directive, and we're going to return, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of this map get right here. And we're going to go ahead and use that for our function. So we're going to use this as a proxy to call the map-get to do all of this stuff right here in our background caller value. So we're going to type map-get, and then between here we're going to go ahead and hard code the name callers from right here, so from our SASS map. So I'm going to type in the first argument, it's going to be callers. So we aren't going to have to specify that anymore because this is only going to accept one argument, and then $caller-name which is the actual value of this variable that gets passed to the function. And I'm going to terminate that with a semicolon. All right, so that's our function. Now we can go ahead and change the background color property value. So I'm going to go down here, where it says map get. And remember, we named our function color, so I'm going to say color. And between that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in primary. So we simply pass in the word primary. All right, so now we can go ahead and save this. So Control S, and let's go to our main CSS. And everything looks good. And let's go out and verify that this is working in our browsers. And so you can see that this worked. So this is a lot more user-friendly. And now you know how to create a function in SASS. Let's continue working to improve this mobile-first design. And let's take a look at our HTML layout. So I'm on my index.html page. And I'll start at the top with the header element, which holds our logo information. I'm going to go back into my SASS file, and I'm going to create a rule set for the header and nest this inside of the body element. So on line 32, after the closing curly brace for the ID BG, I'm going to go ahead and nest this inside of the body element. So I'm going to give myself a couple of spaces, and I'm going to type header and then A, and then my curly braces. And inside of here, I'm going to type C pound FFF, so color white. And then text decoration none, so TDN. And that will get rid of the default text underline that an A tag adds. All right, I'm going to stop there for just a moment, and I'm going to go right back up to the top. And I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple of more variables. So underneath my font main on line 8, I'm going to go ahead and put in a return, and I'm going to create a new variable. So I forgot to mention there's one gotcha in declaring variables. For historical reasons, a hyphen and an underscore are interchangeable. So main font with a hyphen or font underscore main, both elements will display the Montserrat font. So on line 9, I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to name this padding. So $ padding, my colon, and the value is going to be 15 pixels. And I'll close that with a semicolon. The next one is going to be $ borders, and I'm going to go ahead and the value will be 15 pixels. These variables give me some flexibility if I want to adjust these two different properties. Just to clarify, variables can accept any type of property value. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to remove that extra line of space, and I'm going to go back to my header, and on line 39 I'm going to add in padding, and I'm going to type in $ padding. I'm going to go ahead and use that variable. I'm going to put in a return, and I'm going to say display block, so DB, and tab, and I'm going to do text transform uppercase and tab. Our header A selectors text will now appear in uppercase. So I'll save this, Control S, and I'll go back out to my browser, and you can see this is what we are working on right here. So it changed to white, and it put this in all uppercase. All right, I'm going to go back into my code editor. We can keep nesting, but it is recommended that you do not do any more than 3 or 4 levels deep. So let's begin outside of the curly brace that's on line 43, and let's start fresh with the next element, which is the main element. So I'm going to type main and curly braces. So if I go back to my index HTML, this will be my next element right here. I don't have any styles at the present time for the main element. So we'll just leave this as our starting point, and we're going to reference the next element in our HTML. So the next element in our HTML is the section with an ID of card. I'm going to go ahead and type section and then pound card, and I'm going to add my curly braces. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a background of white. So BG and then pound FFF. And then we're going to add padding of 20 pixels. So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger than the other padding. And we're going to do margin of 1M hyphen in auto. So we're going to put 1M on the top and the bottom and auto on the right and left. And that will center this selector. And then we'll add our border radius, so BDRS, and we'll go ahead and pass that variable that we created earlier, which is the one that is borders. And then we're going to go ahead and add a box shadow, BX SH, I believe. So I'm going to just remove all of these. 0 pixels for the horizontal offset, 10 pixels for the vertical offset, 30 pixels for the blur, and RGBA of 000.2 for the opacity. And then finally we'll make the width 80% for this box. So W80p and tab. Let's save this. Control S. Go back out to my browser, and there you go. So it's starting to come together. So now what we're going to work on next is the element that is the UL for the unordered list. I'm going to go back into my text editor on line 52 after that closing curly brace, but inside of the curly brace on line 54, I'm going to type UL, and then, so I went list style type, and then it'll be none. We'll have margin of 0 and padding of 0. So the list style type none will get rid of those little circles, and then we'll also put a margin of 0 and padding of 0 as well. The list item selector that you will create next needs to be started before the closing curly brace on line 57. Let's go and put our list items in. Let's go ahead and style those as well. LI, and add our curly braces, and we're going to put a margin bottom of 10 pixels. The margin bottom will push the elements away by 10 pixels, and then also our span element, and this is going to be used for circles. I'm going to put an extra space in here, but I want it inside of the list item, so I'm going to type span. And I'm going to make a comment here so that I know what this is for. So I'm going to say for the circles. And you'll see what that does in a little bit here. So position absolute, width 20 pixels, height of 20 pixels, and then background color. I'm going to get rid of this right here. So we're going to go ahead and create a new key, and it's going to be primary light. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to add after primary right here, and I'm going to create a new key, and it's going to be primary hyphen light, and I'm going to use a built-in function, and it's going to be called lighten, and I'm just going to copy this value right here, Control C, and I'm going to paste this hexadecimal value in there, and then I'm going to tell it how much to lighten this by, and I need to make sure that I add this comma. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go ahead and show you where this lighten a function is at. So I'm at W3 Schools, and here's SASS Functions, and under SASS Caller, I'm going to go ahead and Here we go, lighten. Lighten creates a lighter color of color with an amount between 0 and 100%. The amount parameter increases the HSL lightness by that percent. So there's a whole bunch of different functions in here that you can go ahead and use in your code. Just wanted to show you where that might be. And where it says background color, and it's going to be primary light. On the next line, I'm going to do a border radius, BDRS, and it's going to be 50%, and that's what's going to make our circle. And then I'm going to do a margin right, and it's going to be 10 pixels. And I'm just going to clean this up and get rid of that. I wanted to show you where I have the list item and the span. If I go back to my index HTML, notice I have a list item, and then inside of that we have this span tag. This is where our circle is going right here. Now we have strong. So let's go ahead and style this strong element. So after span, I'm going to go ahead and type in strong, and it's going to be a display inline block. And it's going to be margin left, and I'm going to use another function, and it's going to be max, and it's going to be 40 pixels. This max function is not specific to SASS. It was already in CSS. On line 75, I'm going to go ahead, and after the closing curly brace, I can type in my section primary. I still want this nested inside of my main element right here. Okay, so for my section primary, I'm going to select color and then FFF and tab padding, and it's going to be the $ padding variable. And then I'm going to do text align center and tab. And then after this section primary, I'm going to style my H1, and I'm going to give this a font size of 2M and a margin top of 10 pixels and a text transform of uppercase. And then outside of that closing curly brace, I'm going to go ahead and style the A tag. So the A tag is going to be transformed into a button right here. Okay, so I'm going to select color, and it's going to be color primary, a border radius BDRS, and it's going to be borders, so it'll be 15 pixels on all sides, and text decoration none, and text transform uppercase. The font weight will be bold, and the background color will be color, and then accent. So I need to put that semicolon, display inline block, and text align center, margin of 30 pixels, auto, -0, and then auto, and then tab, and then padding, and it's going to be $ padding. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, Control S, and I don't have any problems because I can look right here, problems, and I'm going to go out and it's already updated. Okay, so this is what it looks like on my mobile device, and that looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. But if I start stretching this out, this is what it's going to look like on wider devices. But with the help of SASS, we can make the process of responsive design with media queries a little bit easier by using mixins. The @mixin directive allows you to define styles that can be reused throughout your style sheet. Mixins are useful and speed up your workflow. On this web page, Approaches to Media Queries in SASS by CSS Tricks. If I scroll down to the Landon Schraub's technique, he provides an example to use for dealing with media queries. He has created a mixin that will simplify the coding of different media query rule sets. He first defines a variable with a pixel-based value for a breakpoint, and then he defines the mixin using the @mixin directive. This mixin's name is defined as tablet, and inside of the curly braces, he has the @media query statement. You can copy this code and place it in your SASS style sheet to use, or you can also create your own breakpoints wherever you think your content needs to adjust depending upon the size of the viewport. I'm in Firefox, and if I expand this display, and we can see the pixel value changes when I adjust the size of this viewport, and it's letting me know what the width and the height is of the current viewport. As a designer, you need to determine at which breakpoint this design should change to a different layout. I would like for this to display in a 2-column layout instead of stacking everything like in the mobile view. I'm going to choose 800 as my breakpoint for this layout. You can create multiple mixins for multiple viewport sizes, but I'm just going to demonstrate one. I'm going to go back to my code editor, and I'm going to begin defining a variable. So I'm going to go up here after line 11, and I'm going to put in another return, and I'm going to create a variable. And I'm going to call this $tablet. And I'm going to put my colon, and then I'm going to give this a pixel-based value of 800 pixels. Then I'm going to use the @mixin directive, and I'm going to give this a meaningful name, and I'm going to call this tablet, and I'm going to put this in between curly braces. And inside of the curly braces, we put in the normal property value for an @media query, @media query rule. And I'm going to use min width and a colon. So the minimum width is going to be this variable tablet. And the way we add a variable in a mixin is we're going to use a £sign with curly braces. And then we're going to go ahead and put in $tablet. And then outside of this, outside of the closing parentheses, we're going to put in curly braces. And we're going to put @content. And we're going to terminate that with a semicolon. The @content is going to be based on whatever we specify when using the mixin. We will use the @include directive to let you include the mixin in your code. Let's include our first media query using this mixin. So I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to go to my ID BG element. So when the browser is a minimum width of 800 pixels, I want my shape to change. So after the -1, I'm going to go ahead and put in a return, and I'm going to say @include tablet. And inside of this curly brace, this is where I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my shape. I'm going to go back out to my browser, and I'm going to go back to my clip path generator, Clippy. And I'm going to change this to a trapezoid shape. So I'm going to change trapezoid shape. I'm going to move this over, and I'm going to go ahead and change this demo size to 500. So just delete that and add in 500. You can change these styles around. I'm going to go to about right there, and maybe bring this in a little bit more. Something to that effect. So I've modified my shape, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, and then I'm going to do Control-C, which will copy this, and I'm going to go back to my code editor, and I'm just going to paste that in between the curly braces. And I'm going to save this. So let's test this in our browser. So I'm going to go back out to my browser, and you can see that it already updated. So let's go back. Okay, so when it gets to 800, there we go. It makes the change. All right, so that's looking pretty good, but there's some other modifications that I would like to make to this. I'm going to go back to my code editor. So I'm going to copy this @include directive, so Control C, and I'm going to add it in after the beginning curly brace on my main element, and I'm going to paste that in, and then I'm just going to go ahead and remove this property. So I'm going to keep in my mix and directive, but I'm going to add in some different styles. So for our main element, it has two sections, card and primary. We'll display these two sections in two columns by using the CSS grid to position and structure our elements. And I'm going to write display grid. On the next line, I'm going to type grid template columns, and I'm going to say 50% and auto. This will make each section automatically 50% of the viewport size. And then I'm going to go ahead and name those areas. So I'm going to go to the next line, and I'm going to type grid template areas. And I'm going to type primary and card. Those are the names of our sections, so card and primary. So for section card, we're going to put in our @include after the width 80%, line 71. I'm going to go ahead and put in a space. I'm just going to copy that in, and I'm going to get rid of that again. I'm just going to copy that because we're going to use this again. And I'm going to add in the grid area, the name for the one that is card. So I'm going to say grid area, and the name is going to be card because I'm in the card section. And the height is going to be fit content, and I'm going to do align self, and I'm going to say center, and I'm going to give this a margin of 1 em. So I'm going to go ahead and create my next mix-in for our second section primary. So I'm going to go down to where it says primary, section primary right here, and on line 105, after the text align center, I'm going to go put in a space, and I'm going to do Control V, and I'm going to start with my @include directive again. And I'm going to type in grid area, and this one's going to be primary. And then I'm going to add in text align and left. So I'm using text align left because our text is currently centered on our mobile device layout. And then I'm going to add in a margin of 4em, and then a -0, and then 4em. So it'll be 4em at the top, 0 on the bottom and the right, and 4em on the left. And that's going to push this section away from the side of the browser window. All right, I'm going to save this, and I'll go back out to my browser, and I'll just review this. Okay, so here are my two sections. So now what I want to do is I want to style this H1, and I want to put each one of these words on their own line. So to do that, I'm going to go to my H1 element, and I'm going to put in that include tablet directive, and I'm going to change the width to 30%, and I'm also going to change the font size to 4em, and I'm going to change the line height to 0.9em. So by changing the width to 30%, the H1 elements will shrink so each word is on its own line. And so I'm increasing the font size to 4em, and then I'm making the line height 0.09em to bring the words closer together. I'll save that, and let's go ahead and look at that. All right, so you can see that was the change that we made. So I'm going to work on the Learn More button, and I'm going to go back into my code editor. So after the A element, so the last style that I'll add is going to be on the Call to Action button. So if I go after line 34 and I put in a return, SASS supports a handful of useful operators for working with different values. These include the standard mathematical operators like plus and times, as well as other various types of operators. We're going to go ahead and write padding and then $ padding. Remember, we already created that variable. And then, so that's going to be padding for the top and the bottom. And then we're going to do padding and then times 4. So I'm using the times mathematical operator. And I'm going to go ahead and multiply that by 4. So the top and the bottom will have regular 15 pixels of padding. On the right and the left, it's going to take that 15 pixel padding value and it's going to multiply it by 4. So 15 times 4 will be 60 pixels. So you can do math in SASS. So I'm going to save this, Control S. I'm going to go back out. The padding property generated additional space around the element's content. SASS is an extension of CSS, and we covered a lot of SASS basics: variables, nesting, functions, and mixins. SASS makes CSS fun again.